So we learned a lot about Earth's history and dinosaurs and plates moving and so on. Let's continue this story a little bit more and read about how climate has been, not very smooth at all. So it's always changing, but we'll come back and see, as we already mentioned, that even though climate changed a lot and got very hot and very cold, we were not around. So why are we worried about a little global warming now? We keep saying it has warmed by about 1.3 degrees centigrade since the Industrial Revolution. Is it a lot? Well, it turns out it is a lot, especially because we haven't lived through bigger changes like the dinosaurs lived through, and our ancestors, the insects and the birds and the, fish lived through, reptiles and so on and so forth. So after that long chapter, we are now in a second chapter of this book on palm trees at the North Pole. The chapter is called Erratics and Mammoths. Here we will read why not all ice ages are the same and how Native Americans and First Nations people came to America, how Australia's big coral reef developed, the Great Barrier Reef that you may have heard of, what the people at the bottom of the North Sea used to eat. People at the bottom of the North Sea. What do we mean by that? We'll see where they celebrate Christmas in bikinis. And that's Australia in the southern hemisphere when it's December for us. Northern hemisphere winter, they are having a summer in the southern hemisphere. What the recipe for a perfect ice age is. How do we create an ice age? And that it's not the sun's or sunspots' fault all the time. So in short, we'll learn about ice ages and so on. Okay, so let's go back 500,000 years ago now. So we are now in fairly recent times. We are now in the ice ages. Remember this long thing we saw where let me go all the way back to that. So we had many changes along the way. So we had ups and downs, very warm climates, and then we started to cool down, and then we had these lots of wiggles in the last couple of million years ago where we have ice ages and ice ages go away, ice ages and ice ages go away. So these are in the last 2 million years or so. So we are, let's say, in one of them just 500,000 years ago. And I keep looking back because the cleaner, the guy who helps me clean the apartment, is here, and when he's finished he often stands there for me to finish so I can say bye to him, but then he appears in the video. Okay, so now I need to tell you something that not a lot of people know. This is the author speaking to you and I'm reading him. Something that might not make you happy, or maybe it will. It might send shivers down your spine. Would you like me to just tell you? Well, actually we are in the middle of an ice age right now. What does it mean? Well, if we go to Antarctica, there are glaciers several kilometers thick. We go to Greenland, there are glaciers, there's a lot of snow and ice. There are glaciers in Himalaya and the Andes and the Alps and so on and so forth. There are plenty of glaciers. So is this an ice age? Well, not really. So depends on what you mean by ice age. So you and me and all the people in the world are slap bang in the middle of an ice age if we consider this to be enough glacier. And yesterday and all our lives, because we evolved 10,000 years ago when the last big ice age melted away. It's of course a somewhat warmer period within the ice age, but officially it's an ice age because geologists describe a time as an ice age if there are large ice caps to be found on land somewhere on Earth. Not everybody agrees with the definition, but let's just assume we are in an ice age. Geologists are people who study the Earth, so they should know, and they tell us it's an ice age. Then we say, okay, we're in an ice age, and they are right. Just take a look at Antarctica and Greenland. The ice age there is a couple of the ice there is a couple of kilometers thick on average, and in some places thicker than the height of the Pikes Peak in Washington State on western US. If those aren't big ice caps, then I don't know what is. They have been there for 2.5 million years ago, so all that time we have been living in an ice age. So essentially the last ice age, when it was at its peak cold period 21,000 years ago, there were big glaciers on North America, on Europe, in Asia, and so on. So much more glacier, but now we have melted some of them. So I've retained some that were there already before. So we are in an ice age, but a warmer part of the ice age. So all the time we've been living in an ice age. The same ice age as the mammoths and the saber-toothed tigers. Here is a mammoth saying, oh my god, it's so hot because it has all this woolly fur that is built for a cold weather. But they lived in a colder phase of this ice age, and the kind of period that ordinary people like you and me call an ice age. That's what lots of books and websites will tell you too, by the way, and that's what you're used to, unless you happen to be a geologist who would insist that if Greenland and Antarctica have ice sheets, then we are in ice age. So we have a little problem. You can't really say that there were ice ages in the ice ages. So what should we do? Should we join in with the geologists and say that it's been an ice age for 2.5 million years ago? Or do we just call the extra cold periods as ice ages like everybody else and say we are now not in an ice age? In fact, that might make it easier for our brains to handle. Otherwise, they will have to turn everything upside down and shift the mammoths and the bear skins from one brain cell to another. That seems like a lot of trouble. So, let's agree that in this book, an ice age is only an ice age if it's a lot colder than it is now. Now is what? Let's say the last 10,000 years, the Holocene. So here we are going back in time 1.5 million years ago, 2 million years ago, 2.5 million years ago. I hope I am right about that. Yes. So here is a geological ice age. No ice age means all the ice caps have disappeared, and a real cold ice age is where the ice comes down on land much deeper. So in the past 2.5 million years there have been around 25 ice ages like that, extra cold periods. Okay, he has left without standing there. That's good. In the past 2.5, no, maybe not. In the past 2.5 million years, there have been around 25 ice ages like that. It depends on how you count, so you have to be careful. It doesn't matter for us. Extra cold periods when the ice didn't stay at the North and South Pole, but grew more and more, so that even in the summertime it reached as far as Canada, Sweden, Central Russia, and so on. So it kept growing south. As the ice expanded, it pushed sand, clay, and rocks in front of it, flattening hills and forests. At the tips of these expanses of ice like this, new hills grew with piled up stone and everything it brought together. Hills that we now think are perfectly ordinary because we are so used to them. Sometimes the ice came as far south as Canadian border, and sometimes farther and sometimes not as far, but the consequences of every ice age were huge, and many evidences exist that the detectives find for us. During an ice age, more snow falls than rain. Precipitation, we call it. When we say rain, it's liquid. When we say precipitation, it can be liquid or solid or snow. All the snow that falls on land and on the ice stays on the ground and holds on to the water that's in the snow. That means that much less water flows back into the seas because the snow falls on land and just stays there frozen, but water still continues to evaporate from the oceans. As a result, the level of the water in the sea keeps going down, and people and wild animals can walk across the bottom of the sea, because when the ocean goes down, many of the coasts become exposed as land, and you can just walk from Africa to India because so much of the land is just open. That sounds like fun, right? So we'll come back and look at an example of how the bottom of the Bering Sea was used by people to walk across. So we have here Africa to the south, Europe over here, Asia to the east, and America's way to the east, or you can go that way to the west, Indonesia down here and Australia down here. And we know by various detective work that we evolved over here in Africa, and then because of climate change or because we were just curious, we kept going in every direction towards Europe, to Asia, down all the way to Indonesia and Australia and Central Asia, Eastern Asia, and so on and so forth. So here is called the Doggerland. We'll come back and see what that means. So imagine that now there is an ocean here, and it has a sea level, and if sea level drops, you know that the bottom of the ocean has land, even mountains. So if the sea level drops, then that land becomes part of this land. So this person here, a furry ancestor who is walking on two legs, not a chimpanzee or the gorilla that tends to walk on four legs, so he can just start walking across. At some point more recently, they would have built boats and rafts and drifted across the ocean. There are many questions about how they would have crossed the seas and whether they really had a land bridge to cross and so on. And we'll see one example of the Bering Sea. Where is the Bering Sea? Okay, if you go all the way over in the Pacific between Asia and North America, Alaska and Russia, you have a little tiny Bering Strait that connects the Arctic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. If that closes with frozen ice, then you have a bridge on which you can walk across from Asia into North America. And the big question remains, when did people cross into North America? Was it so isolated that nobody got there till very late? Well, turns out that people did get there, but when? It turns out during the last cold ice age. So we will come back and talk a little bit more about those kinds of things in the next podcast.